and Dennis Zine. We've got, we're going to jump right into this on a couple consent items, 1, 2, and 3, unless my colleagues have anything on those items.
Morning, council members. Items 1, 2, and 3. For items 1 and 3, actually item 1, item 3, CO reports came in.
Correct.
That were
With the
released after the
technical
publication of the agenda. So do you want to approve those reports?
Approve those as with the technical amendments?
Okay, number 2 has a technical amendment. So
Correct.
that will be part of your action.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that'll be the action of the committee. We've got no public comment cards. We do have a quorum. We have cards on specific items 6, 8, and 9. So seeing no public comment cards, the public comment portion of the committee will be complete. And we're going to jump right into item 9. As I understand, I've got a special request from Ms. Perry that, and I'm sorry, on item 5, we're going to go ahead and continue that as well per the CAO report. So item 5 will be continued. And then we'll go ahead and jump into item 9, a special request from Ms. Perry to take that item first.
Item 9, motion.
We do
Perry
have
Parks.
2 comment cards on that as well. Okay.
Very good. Item 9, motion, Perry Parks, instructing the fire department to report relative to the 911 dispatch protocols for assisting patients suffering cardiac arrest and to identify potential improvements for enabling patients to receive more effective CPR treatment.
And let me ask, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me ask first, we've got 2 comment cards, Ms. Perry. Would you like to hear those first or after?
Why don't you let them through?
We'll go ahead and hear the public comment cards first. Pat McCosker, please, followed by Reginald Mason. Morning, Ms. McCosker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm glad that this is on the agenda. Thank you for making the motion. It really is an issue, and it's something that we've been talking about internally for some time. Our dispatchers use a system, ProQ, I think they call it, or QA. Used to call it the Clausen protocols because Dr. Clausen, actually, it's his product. It's his off-the-shelf software and protocols. It's questions that dispatchers follow that come up on the screen that they must follow before they do certain things. And quite frankly, it takes a heck of a long time, and in a case of cardiac arrest, far, far too long before our dispatchers are allowed to dispatch. What they tell me is they know 15 seconds into the particular call that they need to get an ambulance and or fire trucks rolling on that victim, and yet they can't. And let me tell you that they are disciplined. They are yanked. When they don't follow the protocols, when they act quickly and in the best interest of the patient, they're yanked off of the floor, put into remedial training for 5 days a week, and threatened with discipline if they don't follow the protocols. I think we need to get over that as a department. We need to not be bound by the sensibilities of it's a business. This doctor's a businessman who has a product and he's protecting his product. He thinks it's perfect and it's pure, and it may work, elsewhere perfectly, but it's not working here in Los Angeles. We need to modify this. We as firefighters want what you want, I believe, and that is to get emergency responders rolling as quickly as possible, to give the best dispatchers in the world the latitude to use their skills. Remember, our dispatchers are both paramedics and firefighter EMTs, and they give those pre-arrival instructions and save lives with them. We need to maintain that, but we need to also take advantage of their expertise because they know when we should be rolling from firehouses, and we're looking for your help with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And another speaker card. Mr. Mason.
Good morning, distinguished committee. I am Reginald Mason. I represent the Hooks family, who's present here with me as well. Mr. Alvin Hooks, Alnisha Hooks, and Mother dear Catherine Green, relatives of Stephanie Hooks, who passed away, and from which this motion was made. And thank you for bringing the motion, Ms. Perry. I think the protocols, if you really look at them, are in some instances sufficient, but in most instances you have a lot of missteps. And what happens is there seems to be, and not particularly talking about this case, there seems to be a disconnect when you have the dispatcher who, by protocol, is following the protocols. But on the other end, you have the firefighters or the paramedics, the EMTs, that are not being responsive. And so there seems to be a need to take a look at that disconnect from when things are supposed to be happening and why those things are not happening. And that was something that was very disturbing in this particular case. So I would encourage the committee to, I think a coordinated effort is to, from what we've discerned, is to look at the actual dispatch protocols, listen to those tapes, see what the dispatcher is actually doing. Because oftentimes, the dispatcher is getting the information out, and there seems to be a unreasonable lag in the response to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher is then at that point, his hands are tied. So I would recommend the committee with respect to the protocols for
Go ahead and finish your statement.
with respect to cardiac arrest, and because these things spill over into the field and other things, then it cascades from there. Thank you very much
Great.
for
Thank you.
giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for coming this morning. And if we can hear from the department on this as well, then we'll go ahead
Yes.
with your report.
Good morning, Chief Alan Norman, Department Privacy Officer. As been said, all of our dispatchers are either paramedics or certified EMTs. The department does use a set of protocols that were instituted by Dr. Clausen from the National Academy of Emergency Dispatch. There are 54,000 members of this academy who have been trained. Over 3,000 dispatch centers nationally and internationally use the protocols. In emergency medical dispatching, your two most important items are, number one, ascertaining where the emergency is, and number two, providing pre-arrival instructions, if they're needed, to ensure that arriving units have a viable patient. Pre-arrival instructions are instructions provided by the dispatcher to the caller in most extreme cases, in cases of choking, cardiac arrest, childbirth, or hemorrhage. To evaluate the delivery of these protocols, the department has a quality improvement unit who monitors case-by-case incidents to ascertain if our dispatchers are doing the correct thing, if they are following the protocols. The quality improvement staff conducts random reviews and specific reviews of our dispatch cases with particular emphasis placed on pre-arrival instructions. And again, pre-arrival instructions would include CPR, the delivery of childbirth, those things that are going to give us a viable patient when we arrive. To ensure that we do continue doing the right things, we've had Dr. Eckstein, our department's medical director, take a look at the entire dispatch system and make some very good recommendations in terms of how we can not only sustain our dispatch system, but make improvements. Dr. Eckstein has recommended we hire 4 additional firefighter paramedics in the quality improvement process to ensure that our dispatchers are doing what they're supposed to ensure the dispatchers are complying with the protocols, and to ensure the dispatchers are getting those emergency services to our patients as quickly as possible and providing them with the necessary instructions as soon as possible to sustain patients' life. Dr. Eckstein has also recommended expediting the development of additional software in our emergency medical dispatch system. He's recommended upgrading policy changes for higher levels of calls to indicate to the caller that, number one, yes, we are on our way, and that's very important to reassure the caller that we are responding, the paramedics are on their way, and to provide pre-arrival instructions to the patients and the callers. The medical director has also developed mechanisms to ensure that there are daily meetings taking place within our dispatch center with the officers and the dispatchers reviewing protocols, reviewing pre-arrival instructions, emphasizing the importance of the pre-arrival instructions. There'll be a continuing process of reviewing 100% of cardiac arrest calls by our quality improvement section. And cardiac arrest is the gold standard of emergency medical services and pre-hospital care, because without the proper pre-arrival instructions, the responding paramedics and the responding firefighters may not have a viable patient. So in essence, our dispatchers are keeping those patients alive and sustainable pending the arrival of the department. Dr. Eckstein has also developed a program to initiate consistent standards of pre-arrival reviews, including training when pre-arrival compliance falls below 95%, and remediation programs when the provision of pre-arrival instructions falls below 80%. And again, this remediation process is a joint effort between our dispatch staff, the dispatch officers, and our quality improvement staff. And the quality improvement staff are all firefighter paramedics. Dr. Eckstein has also recommended the enhancement of the quality improvement training program. And again, this can be accomplished by the addition of several firefighter paramedics to augment that. If you look at quality improvement in terms of dispatch and emergency medical dispatch, quality improvement is essentially a risk management procedure where the quality improvement auditors analyze the performance of the dispatchers, identify trends, either systemic or individual, develop training programs or remediation programs to address those concerns, and conduct ongoing evaluations to determine the efficacy of those training programs and the remediation programs.
Anything else to add?
Not at this
Okay.
time. We're waiting for...
Correct. Couple things with that, and thanks for the overview and the detailed descriptive of exactly what's going on. On a parallel track, just before I turn it over to Ms. Perry, I just wanted to share and also comment on some of the speakers' comments, the public speakers that came. First and foremost, just on a technicality, we don't actually have a Clausen per se directly protocols from him. It is from the National Academy, and the software and protocols which are constantly updated. In fact, I believe we're in the middle of an update from 12.0 to 12.2 now. These are the same ones that are being utilized in London, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and in fact, taking a step up from that, all of those are I believe civilian dispatchers, where we actually have trained medical professionals and firefighters on the phone with folks, walking them through step by step from their training and experience and knowledge in the field as well, on every single incident. But with that, we also have one other additional thing that we've been working on with the department very closely in this committee, and that is an RFP that is about to go out to look at all these best practices, to figure out staffing levels and protocols and what we should be doing for software and all those things and more. It's incredibly comprehensive and an analysis that's going to come back with every recommendation and then some. And it's going to have a seat at the table from not only the experts in the industry throughout the nation, but also with our labor folks and the executive staff, and it's far-reaching beyond what we've done comprehensively in a long, long time. And so I want to applaud the department and their efforts in helping with that, along with FireStat, which will look at a lot of these protocols and dispatch issues, and also response times and what we should be doing to improve. We have to improve some of the issues we've got here, and that goes without saying. And so on behalf of the entire committee, my heart goes out to the family that's here as well. The men and women of the department is doing far more with less than ever before, but they're doing the best they can, and they're doing a pretty good job for the most part, unless it's your family or a loved one that's affected or impacted by anything that occurs. So we're looking at and aggressively looking at, it's the number one and top priority of this committee, is to make sure that the department is running effectively and efficiently, the best resources available, and we're constantly and continuously analyzing that. In fact, it's not only this committee that's doing it. Mr. Krikorian, the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee, has a standing agenda right now as well, every week on his budget agenda, because the fire department right now is looking at, we're trying to figure out what we can do to help them and make it a top priority to ensure that they're getting the resources that they need. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Perry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I wanted to go right to the recommendations, and my condolences to the family here, too. I'm glad that you came today. The recommendations from Mr. Clausen include 4 additional staff members updating the dispatch software, and to develop committees to address further issues that will work with Metro Fire Communications, additional training, and then the accreditation issue. And why don't we start with the accreditation issue first, and tell me where you are in that process and how close the department is to completing the accreditation from the National Academies of Emergency Dispatch. I'm sorry, I have a sore throat. So.
Yes, ma'am. The recommendations that I brought forth were from Dr. Eckstein, our department's medical director. Of the 3,000 centers, call centers, there are approximately 100 that are certified, and it's known as ACE, Accredited Center of Excellence. To achieve Accredited Center of Excellence status, there are a number of protocols that are reviewed by a quality improvement process. And I might mention that to have an emergency medical dispatch system, state law and Los Angeles County Department of Health Services requires that a quality improvement process be in place. To attain a designation of Accredited Center of Excellence, it is required that compliance between 90 and 95% be attained on case entry, chief complaint selection, key questions, post-dispatch instructions, pre-arrival instructions, final code selection, and cumulative overall score.
And what type of accreditation process is the department trying to achieve?
The department for many years has been trying to achieve the ACE accreditation designation. Unfortunately, with the number of calls that the LAFD responds to and with the number of quality improvement analysts that we don't have at this time, we can't reach, number one, the sample size that is required by the Academy. It used to be they required a 3% random review of all calls, and they did settle on a reduced number, 95% confidence level with 5% confidence interval, which significantly reduced the number of calls we would have to review, but still existing staff does not have the capabilities even to review those calls. I was the former commander of the Quality Improvement Section.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by capability? You mean a lack of training?
No, a lack of members, a lack of reviewers.
Okay.
So we don't have sufficient firefighter paramedics assigned to the quality improvement process to reach the threshold of the number of calls that we have to do just to qualify for ACE accreditation.
Tell me about your need to update your dispatch software.
I'm not an expert in that, but Dr. Eckstein has made several recommendations. One of the recommendations would be in the need to update the dispatch software. It would guide the dispatchers more quickly and more expeditiously to recognize when a caller is in a situation where pre-arrival instructions would be needed, and enable that caller to deliver those pre-arrival instructions in a much more rapid manner.
And then why would there be a need to address further issues in a committee format, and what has prevented those committees from being formed to date if they have not been formed? Because that's something that doesn't require any sort of additional budget action. That's just an internal working group.
And
correct?
That is correct, ma'am. And those committees have been in place prior to my report, and due to a number of reasons, the committees have lost membership, and the committees have not been that active.
Talk to me a little bit about talk to me about what those reasons are, because this is in the list of recommendations, so I'm not clear if they're functional or non-functional, and if they aren't, why not? Since this is a recommendation.
Correct. The committees, to my knowledge, are not functional at this point. The committees may be convened on an ad hoc basis, but to my knowledge, they are not functional at this time, and the reason being, I really couldn't speak to that. I don't know.
Do you know how long they have been non-functional?
Just from my experience, it's been 2 to 3 years that the committees have not been in function.
Now, as far as the additional training sessions for staff, what sort of training is necessary, and where are you on that?
We do training based upon a review of EMS dispatch cases, and those are continuing education programs developed by the Quality Improvement Section and reviewed by Dr. Eckstein prior to implementation. It's an ongoing training process based upon identified needs, either systemically or individually. So that process has been ongoing for at least 10 years, the actual training of staff.
So, I'm a little bit at a loss for words, because I can't say today, after talking, whether it's the dispatch protocol or it's the implementation strategy that's missing some of the building blocks. It sounds to me like there is a patchy history on assembling and using these committees to, update how things are going in the field or in the call centers, and whether or not they're working. Do you think that's a proper assessment, or?
Quite candidly, yes, it is. The committees that were in place have not been as robust as they were in prior years. Dr. Eckstein has identified this and recommended the development of, or I should say the reinstitution of these two committees.
And it seems that you undermine yourselves, because this is actually something that you can do without any budget approval or, having to go through you can do this internally and just get it done and provide yourself with that internal support so that you know whether the protocols are out of step or in sync. Where are you on making a request to update dispatch software?
Again, I'm not sure where it is. I know that Dr. Eckstein has indicated to me in his report that is ongoing. Perhaps Chief Yamahata could address that.
Okay, and then on the one thing that does cost money is the 4 additional staff members.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
That does have budget impacts. So let me just close with this, because it sounds like we've got some issues on the table that don't have the in-depth answers that I was looking for. I'd also like to know, and when you come back, why the accreditation process was not completed. And I know the answer at first blush might be that there was a lack of staff needed to analyze, the calls. But, we have to manage with what we've got, unfortunately. So what's the fallback position?
Well, quite frankly, a number of the protocols that we did have to review for accreditation fell far below the 90% or the 95% threshold, and particularly pre-arrival instructions. So that's why the majority of Dr. Eckstein's recommendations contained within his report are for a more robust program of training and pre-arrival instructions, because even with a 95 and 90% compliance in the rest of the protocols, and even if we did have sufficient staff, unless we meet the thresholds of every single one, including the most critical protocol, pre-arrival instructions, we would not receive ACE accreditation. Thus, the recommendation for additional staffing, additional training, the reformation of the committees, the 100% review of all cardiac arrests, and a very robust quality improvement program focusing on the provision of pre-arrival instructions.
So to just sum up, questions still outstanding on the dispatch software, questions still outstanding on the development of committees that work on a regular basis to address issues, the issue of training sessions for staff, where that stands, and then I'm still not very clear as to where the accreditation is, and, you know, in my opinion, it can't all be tied to. Accreditation has to be achieved, and again, working with the resources you've got, not to wait until you get whatever you want to get, which might be, in this case, 4 additional staff people. So I just want a really clear line on where we are on that.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Coring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chiefs. I would just add one other issue that I would hope that we hear back, and that is how we can integrate automatic dispatch of county resources along with city resources, because that was a very clear issue apparently in this very case, and this is something the department's talked about for a decade and a half, and I know we're going to be talking about some of that a little bit later, but I would very much like that to be part of this consideration as well. And I just, one quick comment on...
And that's item 8, by the way, so we're going to get to that.
One quick comment on this. I'm really pleased to hear that the quality improvement process is moving forward. When I took a recent visit to the dispatch center and had an opportunity to listen into some of the calls, the challenges that the dispatchers face because the protocols became very apparent to me. I get why they're important, but on the other hand, when you have seasoned veteran dispatchers, paramedics themselves, and I could identify, on some of these calls as a layperson, that some of the questions being asked were not at all necessary and couldn't possibly be answered by the person on the other end of the phone, and yet they were forced to go through the list while seconds are clicking off the clock. And I think that it's an important process to have, but we have to figure out how we can make it easier for our trained professionals to override the unnecessary parts of that process without being concerned about being disciplined.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Zine, anything to add?
Just one. I understand the policy is they dispatch to all calls.
Yes, sir.
So while they go through the screening process, since they dispatch to all calls on a routine basis, is there any extra apparatus or anything they have to send on a situation, a medical emergency, since they're automatically in dispatch?
Based upon the case entry process, once we ascertain the address and what is wrong with the patient, the chief complaint, the dispatcher will go to a specific protocol, and in cases of a very life-threatening, time-critical situation, we may dispatch the closest ALS resource, the closest BLS resource, a dispatch where we would have sufficient staffing to handle a critical emergency. In cases of an extrication, we would dispatch even additional equipment. That's why it's so necessary that on our initial interrogation of the caller, we determine exactly, and one of the opening questions is tell me exactly what happened, and that guides the dispatcher in dispatching the proper assignment to the call, whether it's one ambulance, 2 ambulances, an ambulance and engine company, a task force.
So while the dispatcher is trying to get the information,
I should say that was a call taker. The call taker and the dispatcher work hand in hand. I'm
call
sorry.
taker is getting that information, the person providing the information sometimes have limited knowledge of the individual. If it's a collision, or if it's a medical emergency, a heart attack, or a stroke, or whatever the case may be, and they're in a panic mode most of the time, trying to disseminate information. At the same time, the call taker is trying to get the information, and there's that window of opportunity to provide that service as quickly as possible. So the call taker wants all the information, and the person who's giving that information may not have all the information. Meanwhile, they're asking the questions, so I can see how that would compound the matter and drag it out longer. But since the policy is to automatically dispatch, will they automatically dispatch BLS or ALS on a medical, or does it matter which one they're going to go?
It does matter, sir.
I mean, what the policy is to dispatch either one or both, or what?
Again, if it's a low-level calls, something, a minor trauma, a minor isolated trauma based upon our interrogation, it more than likely be a BLS response. If there's any question, it would be a BLS and/or an ALS response.
Okay. So they're trying to screen it as much as they can, at the same time, provide the resources in trying to figure out in a panic situation and sort it out. Meanwhile, the seconds are ticking away.
Exactly. Again, our two primary responsibilities is ascertaining the address, providing pre-arrival instructions, but also determining what type of emergency we do have in order to send the proper resources.
And on a 911 call from a cell phone, you don't know where they are. A 911 call from a landline that goes to the police department, then transfer over to the fire department, you do have the address.
That's correct.
On a landline, but not on a cell phone.
And not in a cell phone.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It'll be a recommendation then from this committee based on the discussions and Ms. Perry's recommendations as well. What I'd like back is actually a written report on the additional training required, the software update status, the accreditation issue, and the non-functioning committees that were discussed as well, and what it would take to reestablish those, particularly based on the fact that they're not budgetary and they can be done internally. These are issues that we've discussed in this committee before. These are issues that we'll continue to discuss and keep on the front burner. There are issues that are being taken up in various forms on not only FireStat, but the RFP I talked about as well. But if we can break out those particular areas and have a written report on the status, because quite frankly, just coming back on an oral report and saying we're not sure isn't comforting to hear, or finding out exactly when things will be done in terms of having the committees reestablished and in play, the software updates, and hearing, the technical experts aren't here. So go back to the department, talk to the technical experts, find out exactly where these issues are immediately. And let me ask you this, to have a written report come back on where we're at on all of these points, and we can actually go in depth and have the discussion. I wouldn't mind dedicating an entire committee to this, in fact, when the report is ready. I'd like to do that. When would you anticipate, how long would it take to put all that information together?
I would imagine 30 days.
30 days. Okay, that's reasonable. We'll go ahead and schedule this, Mr. Clerk, for 30 days and keep this item in committee
Very good.
for a written report to come back. Thank you, Ms. Perry. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, next item will be item 4.
Item 4, communication from the mayor and CIA report relative to budget modifications of the United States Department of Homeland Security, fiscal year 2008 Urban Areas Security Initiative Grant Award.
Okay, there's equipment needed, I believe, in this particular grant that's being acquired or purchased. Is that correct?
Pardon me, can you repeat the question?
Equipment. Is there equipment as part of this grant budget modification that will be acquired? Any hardware, software, equipment?
One moment, sir.
Absolutely. If you'd like, we can come back to number 4. We'll go ahead and hold it.
No, I'm just asking ITA to come up because I'm not sure if it's characterized as equipment or software.
Got it.
So perhaps
Not a problem.
they can clarify.
Okay. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Omotayo Ige. I'm with ITA, Director of Communication Services. Yes, the answer is yes. This is going to involve the procurement of software and hardware.
Okay, thank you. And did we go out to competitive bid on that?
Well, there is an existing contract, basically. We already implementing aspect of the project already. So so we do have a contract. There's an existing contract.
That began with a competitive bid.
Yes.
But this is being added on to the existing contract. And in other words, it wasn't part of the original contract. It's being added on to or enhanced. It's a contract enhancement. Is that correct?
Yes.
So my question is, how do we know if we're having a contract enhancement and there's additional software or hardware being added to an existing contract that did go out to bid, we're actually getting the best price on that enhancement if we didn't go out for a competitive bid on that enhancement?
Well, basically, what we enhance is existing infrastructure. We can't use third-party software on this system that's been implemented. You can't just go out and buy somebody else's software to mod it. We already implemented the project already, and we just this is additional. For example, there are two items we're looking at. We're going to be providing a redundancy. We have what we call a control point implemented in City Hall here. We're going to have a redundant site located in our new EOC facility. So, so what we're trying to do is, we already implemented it. What we're trying to do is provide additional redundancy. So this doesn't lend itself to going out to another bid to upgrade aspects of a particular vendor's system.
And as I understand, and I'm sure members of this council have experienced this too, with any ITA development, once we the city, go down a path with a particular vendor, frequently the only enhancements we can get is from that vendor. This is not unusual in that regard, just for the context.
And is this part of or separate from LA Rex?
Well, I think the answer is both. It is, which is not exactly, but it is an honest answer. It's both in that it is providing a foundation that LA Ricks can take advantage of once LA Ricks becomes up and running, but it has immediate utility to the city in terms of the STAR system and for the secondary responders. Provided if LA Ricks is successful with its game plan, it would be part of the underlying infrastructure that brings LA Ricks to
I think the only, and if I could, I'm going to try to figure out the most simplistic way to ask the question. The concern that's been brought up and is actually originally brought up by Mr. Zine, and I looked a little further into it, and as we see these come through often through committee, to make these equipment updates and upgrades and enhancements, why LA Ricks is on its, I believe, third RFP now,
Yes.
and hasn't yet been satisfied, and we're not quite there yet in analyzing the responses and awarding any contracts. Is that correct?
The prior RFPs were set aside for legal reasons.
Right. But the third one is now
Now out.
but not yet responded to.
Correct.
It's still in the circulation phase,
Correct.
if you will. Okay, with that, while we continued then to add backbone infrastructure and software and hardware by proprietary vendors, that, as you had mentioned from ITA, that is not, it's proprietary, so it won't function with other vendors, which is why we're enhancing these contracts.
Well, it's not entirely proprietary. Basically, this system, what we're upgrading existing cities' infrastructure. This is a radio system that supports non-LAPD or LA Fire. It
Right.
supports...
But it doesn't work with other vendors' software equipment, as was the statement you'd made.
I think I understand your
Well, let me
question.
just make the, if I could, please, for 1 sec. No, I just want to finish the question, if I could, and then, so the question really is, if we continue to do this, and layer amongst layer, don't we get to a point where the RFP or the idea of trying to look for the best software and hardware out there is a moot point because we've built up so much hardware and software that doesn't interact with other systems? Don't we get to a point of no return where we'd have to throw everything out if we awarded the contract to a different vendor who didn't work with all the stuff we've already built on? I think that was where Mr. Zine was originally going with this. And I've heard from some of the experts that have weighed into this, Mr. Zine's concern as well. he brings it up, and then as the chairman, all the different vendors call me. So I appreciate that. But
It's been 11 years that
it's been 11 years this has been going on.
LA Ricks.
Yeah, so if I could just turn it over to Mr. Zine.
But,
To
Mr.
add
Chair,
anything?
you're right on path. The problem is we're building these systems, and then ultimately, hopefully someday, we have a system, the LA Ricks system, which will connect everyone as we want. And then, by the way, this doesn't fit with this. That's the concern, is that we're building these implements along the way, but they're not going to connect. And that's the problem. Ultimately, whoever gets the contract in the end, after all the lawsuits, okay, they got the well, this doesn't fit with this, doesn't fit with this. Now we got to scrap it, and now we got to go with this. So all we're doing is taking that $60 million that was appropriated, and we're chipping away bit at a time, and then when we finally, if we ever get one, hey, there's no money. That's the concern that we have, is that you're building this infrastructure. Ultimately, it may not match with what we're looking for.
Or nobody can compete with it because it's already proprietary at that point.
That's
or
the
somebody
problem.
else's system. So if we could address that, yes, please.
So I understand the concern, and I myself have heard that concern and have asked the question, and how it has been explained to me is LA Ricks, as you know, is to bring everyone together under an umbrella organization and an umbrella infrastructure, but bringing together much of our current underlying infrastructure that will work as the foundation and add to it connecting everyone. We're not simply going to wipe away everything that pre-exists. The city of Long Beach has a system, the city of Pasadena has a system. The concept is, and of course the county has its own system, to bring it all together. Now some of those systems will be redundant and can be eliminated over time, but not within the city of Los Angeles. And I have been informed that this infrastructure that we are putting together right now for the secondary responder network is separate from the primary responder network that is out to bid. But ultimately, they will be connected because obviously we want, say, Department of Transportation to be able to talk to either LAPD or the Sheriff's Department, and that will be able to be connected. In fact, some of what has happened, not with this particular outline, but with the prior approval council gave to another Vita switch, has effectively connected the county and the city using our different but compatible systems.
Well, I think that's the concern, is the connectivity and compatible systems, that if we've built up and realizing, and you've got a great point, that the other cities are in the same boat and they have to continue to add their enhancements and updates and infrastructure, software and hardware, just to keep operative while this process goes on as well. Having said that, though, we're the biggest, and so the bigger we are, the bigger the price tag, the bigger the enhancements. And going down that road, there is, I would think there's a point, and I don't know if we've passed it yet or coming close to it or where we're at, but there's got to be some point where it doesn't make sense to look at any other vendors in LA Ricks, because we've added so much that at the point where we select an interoperative provider countywide as part of the process, we would have to either only go with the one we've been working with because of all the enhancements and hardware that won't connect, or opt out of it completely, which sort of throws out the whole process and makes it a moot point to begin with. So at what point do we get, have we done any analysis to figure out that we've either passed that point, and we should just opt out of this completely, or if we went with another system, it just wouldn't make sense, so we'd have to, RFP would have to lean towards what we've got in-house so far? Have we done that analysis?
The answer is yes, and as long as we stay on the secondary responder system, and in other words, are not enhancing, altering, changing our main systems for, say, LAPD, our primary responders or the fire department, that we are have separated out and we're not impacting the larger LA Ricks project in terms of impacting the decision-making of vendors.
Well, if it goes to, say, looking to an expert and somebody who's been working on this from day one, Ms. Decker, you are it, and you have been phenomenal. And so I take what you say very seriously. And
And I-
having your assurance of saying that we won't be back here some point in the future when the RFP has staff recommendations, and one of the recommendations or issues won't be, as we discussed, that we can't go along with what the county is suggesting because our system's not going to connect to it, and we won't ever actually get to that point, is reassuring. So I really do appreciate all your efforts and clarity on this. And
I
the fact that
appreciate
it's
you
done.
saying that, but of course, I always have to qualify when anybody calls me an expert on technology issues that I can barely get my cell phone to work on many days. But I do ask a lot of questions, as do many people. I know the CLA's office asks many questions, the CAO's office. I think the city as a whole is trying to be sure that we are making recommendations to the council and to the mayor on the best path forward, given all the information that we are able to put to date. And I certainly rely, by the way, heavily on ITA and their extreme expertise in this area. But I hear the council's concern. I think it's a valid concern. I can assure you we're asking all of those questions so that we can come here as informed as possible and present it to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Mr.
Anything else?
I know Mr. Bostic's in the room. If we could have him comment on this, since you're part of the LA RICS concept, former chief with the Los Angeles Police Department, now into the private sector, what you're hearing, because you're from the sector that is developing, involved in that, are we on the right track with what you hear?
Before you speak, if you could, I just want to assure we don't have any conflicts. And are you on, if you could state your current position in this at all, or if you're representing any of the vendors as well?
Yes, I do. I work for Raytheon Corporation, who's one of the vendors bidding on LA RICS.
If you want to speak as a public comment card speaker and not on the panel, I would appreciate it. I would be happy to honor that.
I'd just like to get some insight from the other side of the fence that's actually working on the project. 'Cause I understand ITA, I understand public safety, but I'm looking at, is it connecting, or are we going to?
With just to ensure
That's fine.
we're legally fair and making sure that we follow those rules, I'd be happy to hear from you as well. We'll start the clock at 2 minutes, but if we could have you fill out a speaker's card as well on this item.
Can we do that first?
No,
You can do it after. That's fine. You're already here. We trust you.
We'll
Yeah.
trust you.
Well, the world of technology has vastly changed, and from my 34 years' experience in the LAPD prior to where we are today, public safety is far behind in the world of technology. Most technologies are interoperative. In the current public safety market, most technologies are not interoperative by business practice. It's not by accident, it's on purpose, just being honest. And it's a very effective business practice. However, the reality is there's no reason that these systems cannot operate together. What happens is within each system there's a gateway into those systems. So a company can either choose to make that gateway public or make it private, and you have to pay for access. That's really what all this is about. Some vendors choose to make it proprietary access and people have to pay to get into it, or they choose to actually build a system that no one else's radios work on it. So there's the more modern companies are moving towards an open architecture system in every business entity throughout the world, because Raytheon is a systems integrator. We work way beyond public safety. We work in the military space. We work in foreign countries. We work around the world. And their practice has been for 20 years to push for open architecture systems. Public safety is just getting there, but there's a lot of resistance by the companies that currently run most of those systems to an open architecture system. So it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen, and I think that's the vision for LA RICS, from my view, is to have an open architecture, open standard system. You should never have to take a legacy system and replace it. If you have to replace it, it's generally because the company that has that current contract no longer supports the system you have and then requires you to build an upgrade. So it's by practice.
So what you were hearing, do you think we're on the right track from your
I
perspective?
believe we do. You know, I'm speaking from both my experience in public safety and now with Raytheon. Eventually, we don't make equipment, radio equipment, so we're a systems integrator. We don't make our own stuff. We work with several different companies. And we choose those companies because it's open architecture, and that's always been the vision of LA RICS. And hopefully they'll follow through with that vision and make it happen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right on the clock. Look, that was good. You're good. That was fantastic.
It's always a timely.
All righty.
For the city council.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much. And I think we had two No, we didn't have any cards on this.
No.
So with that, it'll be the recommendation from this committee based on the testimony before us, so we'll go ahead and move this item as recommended to the full city council. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Next item on your agenda is item 6, Fire Department to present verbal report relative to the department's dispatch, staffing, and protocols.
We did have one public comment card for this from Mr. McCosker. If you want to come in for item 6, please, before we start.
Hello again.
Hello. Hello again.
Thank you for another opportunity to talk about our dispatch center. Listen, I want to ask for your help here. I have to tell you, I think the fire department, it pains me to say this, but they were irresponsible in this year's budget when somebody recommended or agreed with the notion that we could save money by reducing the force at our dispatch center, changing their hours. What they first put on the table to us was to reduce from the 26 members that we always have available right now around the clock to put on the floor in the event of a major emergency or a high incident volume, down to 10, as few as 10 people. And we pointed out, to them our concerns about public safety regarding that, and we pointed that out to some of you as well, and they have since proposed increasing the number, but still putting our dispatchers on a 40-hour work week. And it's a schedule that doesn't exist on the fire department, so it's absolutely meet and confer. It's a 5-day work week on, nights, graveyard shift, weekends, holidays, that kind of thing. It is still not enough people, and it is still, just as the previous proposal from them was, more expensive than what we do now. We're convinced of that, and they must be too, because they haven't, for all these months, produced any staff report, no analysis of the costs. Now, we've been told by supervisors who are there now, supervisors who were there in the past, and by our own analysis, that it'll cost more than doing it the way we do now. So the savings that was promised you in this budget are not going to happen. What might happen if you don't actually micromanage any change that the department will make in the staffing, what might happen is we might end up with a much less safe public, with a reduced workforce at our dispatch center. So I'm asking you, unfortunately, to please, in your role as the Public Safety Committee of this City Council for the people of Los Angeles, to not let the fire department unilaterally change staffing at our dispatch center, reduce the number of dispatchers there, increase the cost, and harm public safety. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And with that, there's no other speaker cards. This was approved from this year's fiscal budget. It was approved already by the City Council. It's costing an estimated, from the CAO's predictions, working with the fire department, $266,000 a month, I believe. I don't have the committee report from Budget and Finance in front of me, but that's what I recall. And the idea on this, just for the record, was that we're offering right now, we're running on the platoon duties 24-hour shifts and shifting those to an 8-hour shift and 40 hours a week, because all that extra time is overtime, while we would keep public safety at the forefront and ensure that the public is protected. And that this is not regarding the protocols. This is not regarding how they answer the phone or when they answer the phone and what they do on the phone. It's regarding the staffing, and it was stated by the department during the budget deliberations, I believe, that they have the statistics and the call volumes by day and by shift and by hour on when it makes sense to have more folk staffing versus less. That there are certain periods of time during the day where it actually just doesn't make sense to have all those staff there working overtime while the phone is not ringing as much as other times of the day. And so if you could report back on where we're at and also where we're at with impact bargaining on this issue as well. Please. Thank you.
Dave Yamahata, Emergency Operations Fire Department. As we reported in Budget and Finance, in working with the CAO, we will be making a report to EERC on Tuesday with our proposal for implementing the 40-hour work week. At EERC, we hope to get approval and get directions in terms of moving forward. Once we're completing that, then if it is approved, then we will be moving forward with the implementation and meeting with the union in terms of, as we discussed previously, with impact bargaining regarding the practical consequences of moving to a 40-hour work week.
Okay, so those meetings will occur as soon as you've got that, the report done, and the report's going to include the items that was being recommended as well. Those concerns that were brought up by Ms. McCosker, you'll be able to address those and bring those up directly to the union?
That is correct.
Any other questions from my colleagues?
I got a question regarding other departments, fire departments. How are other departments run in this region with the dispatch?
In terms of staffing,
Yes.
you have a mix of different staffing levels. A number of other dispatch centers kind of use either total civilian or a mix or hybrid of civilian and uniformed
No
personnel.
problem with the hours, not.
The hours, I don't have that information
If you could
per
get
se,
that,
but yeah,
you
we
could
can
get that.
get
All-
that information for you. We are one of the few dispatch centers that our employees do work 24-hour schedules.
And then the other question regarding light duty, if a firefighter's light duty, are they automatically sent to the dispatch?
No, I mean, it all depends on the rank of the individuals. Our current staffing level at our dispatch center is at the firefighter level. If you have an individual that is of a different rank, then they would either have to revert to firefighter in order to obtain a position down there. And on top of that, that individual would have to go through the evaluation process to determine if they actually would fit into our dispatch center. When we bring individuals down to work at our dispatch center, they go through an interview and an evaluation process. It takes, as Councilman Krikorian observed down there, it takes a special ability to work down there. You have to be able to multitask. There is a test process that we put all our individuals through and require them to pass the test in order to move forward in trying to become a call taker down at our dispatch center.
Okay, so you got a call taker, then you got dispatch, there's two.
Yeah, the name kind of goes back and forth. In the real sense, you have a call taker that answers your 911 call. Our dispatchers are radio controllers. They're the ones that are dispatching resources, talking to our people out in the field.
Are they interchangeable?
They are. In our current structure, they are interchangeable, and actually that's how the schedule is set up. So an individual has the ability or opportunity to work both call taker and then radio controller.
Is that proposed to remain the same under the new operation?
That is correct.
Thank you. But if you can get that information, I think it might be helpful.
Sure.
I'm not looking at the civilian aspect, I'm just looking at the
staffing.
resource, the staffing of
The hours.
fire personnel.
So we've got this, we'll go ahead and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Zine. This item is also scheduled to continue in the Budget and Finance Committee, so we'll hear it when it's ready for that committee as well, after EERC, I would assume. So,
Yes.
great, excellent, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and take the next item, item 8, please.
Item 8 or 7?
8, and then we'll go to 7.
Item 8. Motion, Englander, Buscaino, Zion, Rosendahl, Krikorian, instructing the fire department to report relative to the status of automatic aid agreements with Los Angeles County and neighboring independent cities.
Good morning, Mario Rueda. I'm Deputy Chief with the Fire Department. Mutual aid is a general term used to describe all sorts of aid that exchanges between public safety agencies and jurisdictions. You've asked about automatic aid, but we not only have automatic aid with our neighboring jurisdictions, we also have mutual aid agreements. We also have assistance for hire, where jurisdictions pay us for response. In San Fernando and Ventura, we actually have contracts for exchange of money. They pay the city for our response. Mutual aid was originally intended to provide a jurisdiction with aid when really their city or their jurisdiction exceeded the capacity, normally due to a fire. We do have exchanges of EMS resources in selected areas of the city. We exchange with the county in Universal City. They provide resources to us in the Harbor Gateway, and we have a number of areas where where we exchange various services. But as you can see, rather than me describe it, I wanted to share the complexity of the number of agreements that we have with our 16 neighboring jurisdictions. We exchange resources with Ventura. We also have assistance for hire with Ventura. We exchange resources with the Angeles National Forest, with the Los Angeles County Fire Department, with Burbank Fire Department, Glendale Fire Department, South Pasadena, Alhambra, again, the County of Los Angeles on the east end, Long Beach. We have agreements with the Coast Guard and a number of our South Bay cities coming into LAX with Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Culver City. Very complex system of exchange of resources. You've asked about frequency of mutual aid. Year to date, the LAFD has responded to 155 structure fires and 207 brush fire automatic aid requests. We have also requested automatic aid 667 times for borderline incidents. I don't have a distinction between fire and EMS aid calls, but we have requested aid 667 times. The long-term solutions for the problems posed by our border incidents are really both technology and a people issue also. The technology issues are automatic vehicle location, which is part of the RFP that's in the new computer-aided dispatch system. The second is CAD to CAD, meaning computer-aided dispatch, connectivity with our neighboring jurisdictions. And that is, as my understanding, is not part of the, at least wasn't part of the elements that I saw in the RFP, but I'm not the expert in that arena. The third people issue I described is really getting all of our neighboring jurisdictions to agree to automatic exchanges of resources, because we do have some problematic areas. The areas that we are most busy in, where we see resources vacated out of an area, also happen to be some of the areas that are most busy for our neighbors. And there are concerns when we negotiate these agreements with our neighbors that their resources could get sucked up into the city running some of our calls. There is also concerns that areas that we would be exchanging resources would deplete our city. For example, Chatsworth. We've been asked previously about responses in Chatsworth outside the city. That would put some of our resources where we have single company fire stations running into Browns Canyon and other places. Around Universal City, which is another area we've been asked about, we do provide one resource there, a rescue and an engine, but that could easily be an area where we would lose resources to the Universal City. In Pacific Palisades is a third area we've been asked about, where we have limited resources, and our resources may be running up the coast or into Santa Monica and deplete our communities of resources. So it's not a simple matter of automatic exchange of resources. The other thing with EMS is not all of our EMS resources are equal in our jurisdiction. Los Angeles Fire Department provides a full service EMS, paramedics and transport, emergency transport. Many of our neighbors either contract for transport or run an entry-level employee program that provides their transportation. So not all of the services are equal. So not simple solutions, but as I stated, the answers are technology, it's people, and in some specific areas it may be the addition of a fire station. We had a fire station on Crenshaw, just south of Slauson, that creates a gap for us. And in that specific instance, the addition of or the return of a fire station might be a solution for a selected area.
Okay, before we open it up to the committee, we do have 2 speaker cards on that, and I've got several comments and questions as well. And but I do appreciate if I could take a second just to acknowledge the the issues that are broad, and that when people hear mutual aid, it means many different things to many different people, but there actually are definitions within the industry of exactly what types of mutual aid and automatic aid and agreements and MOUs exist and the obstacles. In putting it in layman terms, you talked about connectivity and VLS and CAD, and nobody really cares about that at the end of the day. When you're an average person, when you're sitting in your home, and your husband or son or wife, daughter is a victim of a drowning or a car accident or a heart attack, and you call 911 and you just need somebody to show up as soon as possible and save your loved one. That's what you care about. And when you find out later on that there was a medical resource right down the street, sitting in their station, not doing anything, training or washing their trucks, whatever it is they might be doing, but they could have easily responded, and they weren't notified. And then there was a station further that was the one that was notified to respond, but they were on another call and tied up, maybe even perhaps on something that wasn't life-threatening. It wasn't advanced life support. It was basic life support. It was, you can't imagine the frustration of those families that go through that, and that happens, unfortunately, each and every day throughout the city of Los Angeles, because we partner with so many and we have so many neighboring cities and jurisdictions on our borders. This is an issue that is national. It's an issue that, and I truly appreciate the in-depth report that you've given not only today, but when you gave me offline personally to explain, and we spent a lot more time one-on-one when you really went through the difficulties and the challenges. What does CAD mean, the computer-aided dispatch? The fact that, one, there's no way of that station, as that example that was sitting there idle, that could have responded, knew of the incident, because they're different systems that don't even communicate because they're just different jurisdictions. The fact that we don't have VLS, which is the vehicle locator system, and it's a GPS that we're actually now putting into every fire truck in an emergency medical vehicle that we're looking at in the city of LA, we're putting those in. And the idea is that we can and we will know at a second's notice exactly where the vehicles are and who's responding, not just from our agencies, but with those new mutual aid agreements. Once every agency has that technology on board, somebody will be looking at the screen and say, okay, that's where they're at. They can respond. They're not on a call, even though they're in a different jurisdiction. We can send help faster and sooner, and they can respond first and create some of those, that gap that has been existing, life-threatening gap. And so the fact that you've explained in detail what some of those things mean, and most of it is technology versus people, and that, but we're moving towards that at rapid pace as technology evolves, and those RFPs, in fact, are out on the street today. We'll be implementing those shortly. It doesn't excuse what's happened in the past, but we can only do the best with what we've got, which is what you've shared, and I do appreciate what the department has as their focus on enhancing this automatic aid. And so with that, I want to open it up before I ask questions and turn it over to the committee to our speaker cards. First, Mr. Mason again, followed by Mr. McCosker.
Thank the committee again for giving me an opportunity to speak on behalf of the Hooks family. It seems that in some 30 years ago that there was this notion and idea that there would be an automatic or mutual aid agreement between the city on one hand and the county of Los Angeles. We understand technology sometimes doesn't move as fast, and I think that the vehicle locator system certainly in this particular case would have made a world of difference, notwithstanding other issues that arose in this particular case. I would like to think that some focus that would be given to where you know you have stressors along borders, that there would be an emphasis with respect to ensuring that mutual aid agreements or automatic aid agreements are certainly in position in those particular, what I would, for lack of a better expression, call it a hot spot or a stress point. And that seems to have been the case in this particular case, because we had a resource that was certainly 6-7 blocks away And then we had the district within which where the property was located clearly identified, having to send from one end of the district to this border, almost border area of the district when there's a resource that's essentially, and a little bit hyperbole, right across the street. It seems like the efficacy of this automatic aid agreement, going back to really looking at where are those agreements in place, and historically looking at, as the gentleman to my right said, historically we have a lot of volume there, and we have that issue seems to come up often in South Central Los Angeles.
Yes.
Thank the committee.
Great, thank you very much. And then before I bring up Mr. McCosker, just a point on that. And I think it's a good point that we all have to focus on as well, that these MOUs and mutual aid and automatic aid agreements were written 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, if I can ask for just it's an echo chamber in here. If you have got a conversation, you want to take it outside, that'd be terrific. Thank you. Because this is a very serious issue. And when we're talking about public safety and lives at risk, we've really got to focus on this. And a lot of folks have come back and said, we've had these agreements in place for 30 years. And 30 years ago, most of what the department was responding to in every department was why it was called the fire department, were fires. 94% today is the number. 94% of all fire-related calls are medical. It's now the medical department. And we do both. And they do a great job at the mutual aid when there's a massive issue and or a major fire or earthquake. Mutual aid, or the Chatsworth train collision, which occurred in my district, and I was one of the first on the scene on that. We had units from everywhere respond. It's the day-to-day stuff that is critically important and much more complicated than ever. And the fact that there's a tremendous focus on this now, again, and there remains to be, but the issues that the technology is helping to improve and what we need to do, and we're focused on making sure we have those resources to do it and purchase that equipment and technology and update those MOUs is being done. I just wanted to ensure that the comments from the last speaker, that voice is being heard, and it's just not fast enough if it's a loved one that you're affected with. So with that, Mr. McCosker, if you could.
Thank you.
I'm sure you will agree to all of that as well.
I do. I agree with every word of that, and I want to start by thanking you and the three of you and a couple of your colleagues for having this on the agenda for this motion. You're absolutely right. Nothing we want more than to get there quickly, to have the closest resource show up. I kind of referred to that earlier when we were talking about our dispatch center, and the same is true in this case. I worked for 7 years at the fire station on the other end of that long panhandle that connects the station on Slauson to the one down in Westchester, and I was a fire truck driver and had some of those 10-minute responses that were ridiculous. We drove right by a county fire station in Ladera Heights. It was stupid, or unfortunate maybe is a better word. That needs to be fixed. At a minimum, we need seamless mutual aid with the county fire department and the others around us, so that it doesn't take time. You don't have to pick up the phone, so that it happens right now. I would say, quite frankly, that forward-thinking people that are concerned about not only public safety but about costs might want to look at doing even more than that, because 40 years ago, a very extensive study was done that said that we ought to have a regional fire department in LA, that California ought to have regional fire departments, and one of them would be this metropolitan fire department in LA called the Los Angeles Fire Department, which we've since changed our name to. So we ought to be working especially with the county that surrounds us and with the others, and make sure that we're training together, we're working together, we have the resources we need, all of them, and no extras that we don't need because of redundancy, and provide better service and a quicker response. This is a tragedy, and I can't tell you how bad rank-and-file firefighters feel for your loss. That's why when we see a loom up, for instance, when we see smoke in a nearby district, we start rolling that way. And we beg for permission to go because we know we can get there quickly. We want to go and help in every instance. So this needs to be fixed. We thank you for looking at it, and we'll work with you to fix it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Krikorian. Anything? Mr. Zine? Okay. Thank you very much, and we'll go ahead and hear back when and bring it back as soon as we get some updates from the fire department, and keep this item in committee for now until we hear back on how things are progressing. I know we've got a lot on our plate with what we're doing and all the other items we've discussed. This remains a top priority, and I just want to assure the families and those that are out there and the firefighters as well that we're going to focus on that, and we're going to continue to. So thank you very much. Number 7 is an action item. It's the purchasing of mobile radios. We'll go ahead and approve that if we could. I've got one question on it, but if we could, before we lose a quorum, we'll go ahead and approve that item as well.
Very good.
Mine's more of a technical question. Mr. Zine, you can stay in if you want to ask him any questions, and I'll let you go first.
That's fine.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Wanted to ask on this particular item what we're doing to achieve. It's actually a note and file on the motion, actually, for action. Right before Mr. Kukoin was walked out, I wanted to get that. What we're doing to achieve some efficiencies and cost savings. We've got a lot of departments and proprietary departments that are purchasing not only technology, but other types of equipment, off-the-shelf equipment and this really came out on the radios, where we've got LAXPD and GSD and fire having similar radios, but all different RFPs and contracts. And then some of those contracts from the proprietary or other departments are contracting with piggyback contracts with the county instead of us looking at a holistic approach citywide when we go out there and say, okay, let's add additional equipment, whether it's technology or otherwise. And what we're doing to reverse that trend or look for those efficiencies, and if we could speak to that as well as the idea of reverse auctioning, that would be great. Thank you.
Debbie Ramos, Department of General Services. We actually do take into consideration the needs of both fire and police and DOT when we are going out to bid. We employ a number of different strategies for ensuring that we're getting the most efficient price. We do some market research. We're doing benchmarking. In terms of benchmarking, we're looking at pricing that other agencies are getting. And we often find that it behooves us to piggyback or enter into cooperative purchases, say, for example, with the county, where we're able to not only leverage the city's requirements, but also the county's requirements in order to optimize the pricing. When we're looking at cooperative purchases, we're not only looking at just one agency's contract, but we're looking at different agencies. So, for example, with Motorola, there is I believe it's a WISCA contract, as well as a county contract. And so we compare pricing for, what is the county getting, what is WISCA getting? And based on that and looking at the requirements of the city and what is included in the contracts, we'll make the decision, we're going to go with this contract or we're going to go with that contract, because it's going to give us the best pricing.
And this came out of the budget deliberations, and particularly as it pertained to maintenance and warranties and parts for these and servicing the technology, that we were finding different departments having different requests for maintenance levels and parts that were all different pricing points on the same equipment. As this was coming through the budget deliberations for the fiscal year approval, we were finding that the departments were the ones actually on the record stating that they needed to buy X and Y parts or warranties or service needs on the same equipment that we were utilizing in other departments, and there was all different price points. So that's where this emerged from. And I don't know if that was just over the years of us not doing a great job and we're doing a better one now, or there hasn't been any kind of contiguity or working and reaching out with other departments to explore what those maintenance issues are or parts that they need to buy and replacement parts, whether it's for vehicles or other things. So
the structure, Ken Desowitz, also General Services, the structure of the contracts are such for purchasing agent contracts, which is what we represent based on authority in the charter and the ad code, is that we are authorized to procure for the non-proprietary departments, all the non-proprietary departments, for equipment and supplies. Our major customer for this type of equipment is really ITA. They're the ones that are...
But when you say for the non-proprietary departments, why aren't we working with proprietary departments on it as well?
We do work with the proprietary departments, but they are not required to utilize our contracts. They have their own purchasing organizations. They have their boards and commissions that approve their contracts. They have their own...
Do we do joint contracts for radios and equipment with the proprietary departments at all now?
I believe the proprietary departments actually piggyback off of our contract. So the price points that you talk about really are the same. Well, I think there may be a misunderstanding in terms of they may be buying a slightly different model or an older version or a newer version, and there might be a slightly different price. But
Here's my understanding, though, and my concern on piggyback contracts is, for example, if we go out there and we put out a bid for 5,000 radios at a cost of $4,000 roughly a piece. That's probably around what our radios cost. Our Rovers are about $4,000, $3,800 I think a piece. And we put out a bid for $5,000, and then we get that bid back, and we're purchasing those radios. And this is just an example. And LAXPD or one of the proprietary DWP comes back and says, we're going to piggyback on that because we need to buy another 1,000 or 2,000 radios. So they're going to get the same price, but what we didn't get was a price for 7,000 radios instead of 5,000 radios. So they piggybacked on the contract, but it wasn't bid originally, even though they needed it as well. And what we were finding and talking to some of the departments is they'd come back and say, well, either A, we didn't know you were going out to bid at the time, and we realized that we too need some radios or equipment or vehicles or whatever that might be. DWP just put out another bid for vehicles is a great example. And a lot of the vehicles and the trucks and some of their fleet, their general motor fleet is very similar, if not exactly what we need. And either LAWA has got a bid out right now for additional fleet. There are other departments within the city that have similar bids out. And so the piggyback contracts don't always get us the best and lowest price. And at the end of the day, is there a way to, before we put out, or ask the proprietary departments even before they put out a bid, is some kind of circulation of, we're going to be putting out an RFP, what is it you need, we'll add to it.
Right.
Because we're getting a diseconomies of scale now. And then we're locked into a contract that if they come in and say, well, we're going to piggyback because it's easier and faster and we don't have to go out to RFP and we're going to end up with the same technology anyway, we'll just go ahead and pay the price you paid. We're not necessarily getting the lowest price. We're creating the efficiency of utilizing less staff to go out there and generate another RFP, which is great. But it doesn't ensure, in fact, it contradicts the fact that we're going to be getting a lower price based on volume.
A perfect example of what you're describing is a recent solicitation that we did for office products. We did an $8 million solicitation that was on behalf of the non-proprietary departments and the proprietary departments. We joined forces, if you will, shared data, and put together a solicitation for the whole city for office products, including paper and toner cartridges. And the results, we used a reverse auction. You mentioned in the beginning of your opening was, what strategies are we using? We used this reverse auction strategy, which is an online eBay-style type bidding process where we had 9 bidders participating over a day and a half, not submitting one bid in the traditional format, but submitting over 1,600 bids in this day and a half process. And we achieved over $1 million in savings by utilizing that approach and, again, combining the resources of all the city's agencies.
I understand that that's a new concept that we've just taken on. We've only done about a dozen of these.
That's correct.
And we've saved about $3.5 million?
It's closer to $5 million now.
$5 million now. And our proprietary departments are engaged in this as well?
They are, yes. It's new.
Who came up with this?
This process has actually been in place for
You did. No.
many years.
Good answer. Let me ask, what other city is doing reverse auctioning?
It's more prevalent on the East Coast. The technology's been available for many years, but the implementation has been very complex and difficult.
Because we can't show information on the bid? Is that like who's bidding? Is that why?
That is a very big part of it. We do maintain the sealed bid process. The bidders are anonymous while the process is going on. All they see is their rank. They don't see actual pricing. More and more agencies are trying to do it, but they're trying to do it themselves.
Do we actually have a contract with a provider for this?
That's correct. We utilize a third party to manage the process for us and utilize their software, and it really does help maintain that sealed bid process. Plus, they have a very unique and very good software that makes this process happen.
Is there a way to get an online demonstration before the entire city council so we can share what this reverse auctioning is and how we've been able to save $3.5 or $5 million to date, and what we plan on doing to enhance that and continue it?
Absolutely, and it's actually being recognized by the Productivity Committee.
The committee report will reflect that when we send this over to council. It's a note and file motion, but I think the full city council needs to see what we're doing, which is revolutionary and cutting edge in California that nobody else is doing, and share this information because it's...
In December, I'm actually sharing this strategy with the state procurement organization, doing a presentation on December 5th at the MTA.
Can we add vehicles to this as well?
We're going to do the police vehicles that were authorized in the budget this year, working closely with Motor Transport Division as soon as they're ready with their specifications, yes.
Fantastic. And the last thing on this is we may one day even add politicians to it. You bid on the lowest politician that you want to serve in office. Mr. Zine. All right. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move this item on to council with a full presentation, if we can do an online version before the council, and show what we're doing for procurement, working with the other departments, but more importantly, reverse auctioning and how we're saving the city millions of dollars.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That will conclude the Public Safety Committee